Hello and welcome back to Facts with Jax. Today I present to you another episode of Horrific History, in which I discuss historical events that are especially gory, brutal, devastating, disturbing and or scary, but most of all, interesting and factual. Today's topic is about the Sultana disaster, also known as the Sultana explosion and the sinking of the Sultana. This devastating event has several inconsistencies around it, and I will discuss these to the best of my ability. If I have anything wrong that you know of, feel free to correct me in the comments. As there are several sources with several different ideas on what happened, it's not as easy as one might think to get completely accurate information. That being said, sit down class, it's time for another history lesson. On the 23rd of April 1865, the 260-foot-long steamboat named the Sultana stopped in at a port in Vicksburg, where the Captain J. Cass Mason and the engineer of the ship were to meet with several officials to discuss the state of the ship's steam boiler, which had seemed a bit battered around despite earlier inspections. The steamboat itself was inspected on the 12th of April in St. Louis by two federal inspectors named John McGuire and John Scaffer, according to the Steamboat Act of 1852. The boilers were subjected to what's called the hydrostatic test, which is how things like pipelines, gas cylinders, plumbing, etc. are tested for leaks, of 210 sig, pounds per square inch gauge, and were deemed to be acceptable. Although they were supposedly acceptable, there is a fair bit of evidence that suggests that these boilers had incurred damage over 2 years of operation. It was not uncommon for the ship to carry a couple of hundred passengers per trip, as it regularly transported freight and passengers between St. Louis and New Orleans on the Mississippi River, and didn't seem to show any real signs of danger. It was on a routine trip back from New Orleans when they stopped in Vicksburg and were soon asked by Union government officials to assist in transporting prisoners of war from the Civil War from Confederate prisons such as Cahaba and Andersonville back to the Northern Territory. In order for this, the boiler had to be fixed first. Due to being rushed by Union Army Captain George Williams, instead of doing a full time-consuming repair, the captain decided instead that the boiler should just be patched. Williams hastily ordered all prisoners from the prisons and from the hospital in Vicksburg onto the boat, with over 2,000 to 2,400 people, depending on which source you go to. Occupying the ship meant to hold 376 people, meaning it was over 5 times its legal carrying capacity. Refusing to separate these men, Williams refused to listen to the concerns from other officers, insisting that all the prisoners do not get separated at all and instead stay on the same boat. Severe overcrowding and the fast current due to the spring thaw meant that the weight and the struggle to stay afloat in such a vast current put too much pressure on the boiler. Because of this, not long after departing from Memphis, Tennessee in the early hours of 27th of April 1865, the overworked boiler exploded and blew apart the center of the vessel and started an out-of-control fire. To quote hartfordsteamboiler.files.wordpress.com, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit under normal conditions. If boiling water is contained, as in a boiler, the pressure increases, and the temperature at which water boils increases. At the Sultana's normal operating boiler pressure of 145 sig, water boils at 363 degrees Fahrenheit. If there is a leak or break in the boiler, the pressure will drop and therefore the temperature at which water boils will decrease. At this point, the water temperature will be greater than the boiling temperature, therefore some of the water flashes to steam, expanding and repressurizing the boiler. If the leak or opening in the boiler is small and the boiler is strong enough, the boiler contains the pressure and the water or steam slowly leaks out and the boiler pressure slowly decays. However, if the boiler can't contain the pressure due to a weakness, more and more water flashes to steam and continues to rip the openings wider, almost instantaneously. For the Sultana, if the pressure in the boiler dropped from 135 sig to 0, up to 950 pounds or 15% of the water in the boiler would turn to steam. Each cubic inch of water expands to as much as 1 cubic foot of steam, or 1,600 times the volume. It is this tremendous expansion that results in the ferocity of the explosion. Many people died on the boat itself immediately, whether it be from being in the center of the explosion or being hit by flying debris. Others died trying to swim to shore from their injuries. And some even made it to shore before dying from severe burns, even after being hospitalized and giving statements to police and doctors. Out of the approximate 2,000 to 2,400 people on board the ship, about 1,800 of those died, thus making this the deadliest maritime incident in US history. At the time, there was a bit of suspicion, which remains even to this day, that the boiler may have been tampered with or destroyed by Confederate spies using a coal torpedo, which is an iron casting which appears to be a chunk of coal, but is filled with gunpowder then dusted with coal and put into the coal bins. Though it made sense at the time for this feeling to come to light due to the recent Civil War and the emotional friends and family of the victims, it doesn't particularly stand to this day, as any evidence for this theory is circumstantial, and based on a reported confession years after the initial disaster. It is far more likely that the event was caused due to, as I described, an insufficient inspection on the boiler and equally insufficient repairs done on said boiler combined with the overcrowding of the vessel. Thanks for tuning in to this video. If you liked this video or learned something new, go ahead and like it and share it around. If you want me to discuss anything you think people should learn about, regardless of the subject, or just something you're interested in, tell me in the comments and I may just make a video on it. As always, I'll see you next time. Till then, check your facts. See ya!